So I had this morning, not too long ago, my task manager, or it had just one item on it, written in this, very noble sounding way, work on the book.
Mm-hmm.
I sat down, opened the file, and then I got up to make coffee. I came back, sat down again, and decided my email inbox definitely needed checking.
Of course, the suddenly urgent task.
Right. I archived a few newsletters. I looked back at the blank page. I decided the screen brightness was just a little off. So I adjusted it. Then I adjusted it back.
Oh, I know that move.
I looked at the clock. 27 minutes had just vanished, and I hadn't typed a single word. It was this weird, quiet panic. I wasn't being lazy. I was at my desk.
You were present physically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But work on the book felt like this. It was wall. It had no edges, no door. It was just big. And my brain was doing everything it could to find an exit. I tried something else. I closed the main file, opened a sticky note, and I wrote a new task, something almost comically small. Opened chapter 3. Had one sentence about the light under the door. It took 11 seconds.
Yes.
When I went back to the document, the wall was gone.
That whole story, the frustration, the resistance, that half hour just evaporating, I think everyone listening has felt that.
Right. It's so universal.
And you hit on the absolute core of it. It wasn't laziness. What you were feeling was hesitation at the edge of uncertainty.
Hesitation at the edge of uncertainty. I like that.
That big, vague task, work on the book. It's like an undifferentiated block of marble. It's a design flaw in the task because it demands effort and a whole bunch of decisions just to get started.
That's such a critical distinction. Procrastination isn't laziness, it's hesitation.
Yeah,
it reframes the whole problem.
It does. And that's our mission in this deep dive. We're going to explore the science that lets us turn that paralyzing fog into a runway, using these tiny specific actions to dissolve massive resistance.
Okay, let's get right into it then, because that is the real mystery. Why does that tiny 11-second task work? Why did add one sentence dissolve resistance that 27 minutes of anxiety couldn't even touch? What is actually going on in our brains?
This is where we go beyond just the psychology and get into the neurochemistry. We need to talk about something called the 90-second neural reset. It's a concept from a Harvard-trained neuroscientist, and it's fascinating.
A neural reset.
Yeah, the resistance you felt, that anxiety, it wasn't just a mental block. It was a full-on neurochemical event.
So when I feel that flutter of anxiety opening a big document, that's not a choice I'm making. It's just my body reacting.
Absolutely. Think of it like this. An emotional trigger happens, like the stress of that huge task, and your brain kicks off a survival response. It dumps stress hormones, like noradrenaline, into your bloodstream.
That's the feeling, right? The heart rate, the tension.
That's it. But here's the crucial insight from the research, the timeline. The entire chemical surge, from release to being fully flushed out of your system, it's all done in less than 90 seconds.
90 seconds. That's it. That's incredibly fast. But hang on, if the chemical part is over in a minute and a half, how can I stay stressed out for like an entire hour?
And that is the pivot point of self-control. Any emotional response that lasts longer than 90 seconds isn't from the original chemical release. It's being perpetuated because you are actively, maybe subconsciously, rerunning the thought loop. You're choosing to rethink the thought that triggered it, which stimulates the emotional circuit again and again. You're keeping yourself on that stress roller coaster.
So the problem isn't the first wave of emotion. It's my brain dwelling on it and creating more waves.
Precisely. And high emotional intelligence in this context is just the ability to recognize that 90-second window, to use it as a strategic pause.
So you notice it, you feel it.
And you just acknowledge it without judgment. I'm feeling anxious about this. You let the chemical cycle finish. Maybe you do some slow breathing to activate your body's brake pedal, the parasympathetic nervous system.
And my tiny task.
Your tiny task was a brilliant tactical move. It bypassed the huge emotional cost of the start. It was too small to trigger major anxiety, so it short-circuited that whole resistance loop. You chose a response instead of just reacting.
Okay, that covers the emotional regulation part. But let's shift to the task itself. You called work on the book a design flaw. Even if I'm perfectly calm, a bad goal is still a bad goal.
Right. And they fail because the fix isn't more willpower. It's about minimizing cognitive load.
Cognitive load. The mental energy it takes to process information.
Exactly. The moment you wrote work on the book, your brain had to start asking a dozen questions. Which chapter? What part? Do I need research? What if I get stuck? All those micro decisions use up energy before you've even started. You're tired just from looking at the instruction.
So the goal is to make the start Totally frictionless.
Totally frictionless. And the best research strategy for this is something called implementation intentions.
Implementation intentions. It sounds a little academic.
It sounds it, but it's incredibly practical. It's a strategy designed to solve the problem of just getting started. Instead of a vague goal like, I'll finish the report, you link an action to a specific cue in your environment. You're essentially preloading the decision.
Okay, so what's the formula? How do you write one?
The classic format is an if-then statement. Or, I intend to do behavior Y when situation Z happens. So instead of write, it becomes, I intend to open chapter 3 when I sit down at my desk after my morning coffee.
So the situation sitting down after coffee becomes the trigger for the action.
Exactly. It delegates the control, makes it automatic.
But does that really work when the task is genuinely difficult? I get it for easy habits, but what about really hard projects?
The research shows it's actually most effective for difficult goals. In one study, people with challenging goals who just had a general intention only succeeded 22% of the time.
22%? That's low.
Very. But when they used clear implementation intentions, pairing the goal with a defined cue, the success rate jumped to 62%.
Whoa! That's almost a threefold increase, just from adding a few words to clarify the start.
It is. It's a massive return because it makes the action immediate and automatic, almost like a habit. The goal gets edges, and those edges give it power and reduce your anxiety.
So the practical advice here for you listening is to rewrite every fuzzy task into a visible action. Something a stranger could watch you do without needing to ask a question. Edit the report. Fails that test. But find the paragraph on Q3 earnings and cut one sentence. That's a runway.
And this idea of clarity doesn't just work for individuals, it scales up dramatically. Let's talk about how this applies in a corporate setting with project managers trying to fight team procrastination.
Oh, team procrastination has to be a nightmare. It's individual resistance, but compounded across, what, 10, 20 people?
Exactly. Collective paralysis. You see it with huge projects like a massive infrastructure overhaul. It often gets disguised as endless planning meetings or just refining the requirements.
Which is the corporate version of me adjusting my screen brightness.
It's the exact same mechanism. There's this story of a project manager named Sarah leading a huge year-long upgrade. The first big task was initialize database schema. Terrifying. The team was just stuck debating endlessly.
So how did she apply the 90-second rule to a year-long project?
She knew she just had to break that initial threshold of resistance, so she called a meeting and announced what she called 90-second sprints.
I like that.
She broke that giant task down into 3 tiny, non-threatening, specific actions. She put them up on the board. 1, open SQL Management Studio. 2, create a new database called Project Phoenix. 3, commit the empty database to Git.
That third step is brilliant. It's a tiny, visible, irreversible commitment. It takes 20 seconds.
It's so strategic. That minuscule action created this ripple of momentum. Suddenly, they weren't talking about the terrifying 50-page plan. They had done something. The action itself provided the confidence, not all the preparation.
And you can see a really clear parallel there with Agile software development.
Oh, the parallels are direct. Agile is basically built on this iterative small batch approach. Instead of aiming for one massive big bang launch 2 years from now, which creates enormous anxiety.
Right.
Agile is all about continuous low-stakes delivery. You release a minimal viable product in these short 2-week sprints.
So the 2-week sprint is kind of the corporate equivalent of the 90-second rule reset.
In a way, yes. In terms of managing the anxiety, that constant low-stakes delivery reduces the collective fear of some epic failure. Every 2 weeks, you get a small win, and that builds confidence. You're always moving forward.
It's managing fear by managing the scope. Okay, but what if the task is small and clear, but the emotional cost is still just really high? Or the reward is too far off? That brings us to commitment devices.
Commitment devices are definitely a more advanced form of this. It's behavioral economics applied to self-control. It's a tool you voluntarily use to lock yourself into a plan and overcome something the Greeks called akrasia.
Akrasia, what is that exactly?
It's the state of acting against your own better judgment. You know you should be doing your taxes, but you watch another documentary instead. A commitment device makes the pain of procrastinating higher than the pain of actually doing the work.
You have to give us the famous example of filmmaker Alice Wu. It just perfectly illustrates the stakes here.
It's a classic. So to finish her screenplay for the half of it, Alice Wu wrote a check for $1,000.
Okay.
She made it payable to an organization whose values she strongly opposed, an organization she did not support, and she gave it to a friend with clear instructions.
Oh, where?
If the screenplay wasn't finished in 5 weeks, The friend had to mail the check.
Wow. That is leveraging loss aversion on so many levels. The financial loss, sure, but also the deep psychological pain of funding something you're against. It makes not doing the work unbearable.
It completely locked her into success. So when we pull all this together, the 90-second reset, the implementation intentions, these commitment devices, we see one big principle emerge.
And it is.
The single most profound insight is that readiness follows action, not the other way around. You don't wait to feel motivated. You engineer the start to be so easy that the momentum creates the motivation. That first click, that one sentence, that empty database, that's the lever that moves the whole project.
It's all about engineering the environment to make the start effortless.
And what's really fascinating is that this ability to regulate emotion and start tasks it has measurable physical effects on your brain.
You mean beyond just getting more done?
Yes. The sources we looked at show that consistent mindfulness practice, we're talking just 5 minutes a day, leads to measurable increases in gray matter density in the parts of your brain tied to emotional regulation.
So the small action isn't just a productivity hack. It's literally a form of brain training.
It is. This consistent practice physically strengthens the neural pathways between your rational prefrontal cortex and your emotional amygdala. So if taking a single 90-second action can kickstart a project today, just consider that using that same 90-second window consistently for emotional regulation is literally rewiring your brain for better decision-making and better performance for years to come.